Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Embassy. Today we are welcoming Professor Arthur Duff for his lecture on connecting India and Ireland to creative industry under Ireland India Friendship Lecture Series, which is a brainchild of Ambassador. Professor Arthur Duff is the joint founding director of Studio Praxis and Avalok in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. He first visited India in 1980 to join the first annual documentation camp of the Vijayanagara site of UP, Karnataka, organized by Dr. George Leach. In 1981, he enrolled in CEPT University in Ahmedabad, Gujarat, as an undergraduate student of architecture. As a student, he collaborated with authors and researchers on a range of architectural and cultural projects. Professor Duff started the Gazetteer of Iris in India, a record of Irish men and women who contributed to India. Currently, he is seeing how it can become an interactive online portal that is fully accessible to all. He has documented numerous historic wooden buildings which were subsequently reused in institutions such as the Crafts Museum and Sanskrit Foundation in Delhi. After returning to Ireland, he established the Duff design practice offering architecture, interiors and furniture design services. Also, he set up the Duff Digital Workshop for the manufacture of furniture as well as the Duff Digital Retail shops in Dublin. He has conducted lectures and courses on aspects of Indian architecture, cultural and religious traditions in the Faculty of Architecture, and the extramural program for adult learning in UCD Dublin, Faculties of Architecture and Art in the University of Ulster, and National College of Art and Design. Professor Duff had advised President's Office on Indo-Irish connections for President Mary Robinson visit to India. Before I request Professor Duff for his lecture, I request His Excellency Ambassador for his introductory remarks on that.
Namaskar, very warm welcome to the Indian Embassy. Friends, it's a great honor and privilege for us to welcome you. As you all know that this year is a very historic year for Ireland as well as for India. For Ireland it's 100 years of independence, for us it's 75 years of independence. So this is a historic milestone for both of us. And our Prime Minister has given the nation of India a clarion call that we must not only use this occasion to celebrate 75 years of India's democratic experience and celebrate their accomplishments, but also we use this time to strategically think about the next 25 years, what he calls Amrit Kaal, when India becomes a 100 years old democracy. So as India's representative here, my job is to strategize and think about the future of India-Ireland partnership for the next 25 years. And in that context, I felt that the best way to reimagine and reinvigorate the India-Ireland friendship is to begin with greater conversation, greater dialogue. In Buddhism, there is a very significant principle that mano ubbangama dhamma mano setta mano vaya. It means that all the catalysts for action arises in our mind. If the mind thinks about something positive, something kind, compassionate, then you get pleasure and happiness follows. If the thought in the mind is negative and destructive, then suffering follows and leads to suffering. So, if I think about the future of India-Ireland friendship, then I think the first and most important thing is to think about each other more. And that is why we have launched, with the support of the Indian Embassy colleagues who are working very tirelessly with us, to use this India-Ireland Friendship Lecture Series as a platform where people get together physically wherever possible, but mostly through virtual means to share their story. Ireland and India have made tremendous progress and stunning accomplishments as vibrant democracies, but that story is unfortunately not so well known in each other country. And therefore, we are looking forward to telling the people of India about the very mesmerizing opportunities that the transformation of Ireland presents, whether it is social development, economic development, technological transformation, or policy issues and governance issues in a democratic framework. How the Ireland's experience and success stories are creating interesting opportunities for Indian people to learn, benefit, and partner. Similarly, we want to create wider awareness about India's own very fast-paced, breathtaking transformation under Prime Minister Modi among the people of Ireland through social media, social platforms. And in that context, when I started looking at trends, then I couldn't think anyone better than to start with Professor Arthur, because he's not only my really very first friend since I came to Dublin. In fact, he was very kind and generous to come to our house. At that time, we couldn't even open our gate because I didn't know how it opens. And also among friends I know, he has been probably the most deep. He has had deepest ties. His first visit, took place in 1980, and his engagement in India has been not of one-off kind. He has sustained it, and the range of his experience of India, his engagement of India, dealing with cultural issues, dealing with academic issues, dealing with religious and social issues, is really phenomenal. That is why I was very happy to get connected with the Professor now and request him to deliver this substantive lecture. And also, one area which really impresses me about him is that in India they are saying that there is a wealth of knowledge, which is a very distinct asset, because it is only a set of wealth and treasure which, as you disseminate, as you share, it grows. Professor Duff has extended that concept to friendship. Like more friendship you share with each other and extend the circle of friendship that grows. I'm very humbled to acknowledge his support to me, that he has been so generous in sharing his contacts, his friend circle, and his friend circle has become the closest friend circle of my guides and mentors, Ireland-related issues that I know of. I'm very grateful. Dr. Duff, you are so well known in India, and a lot of people have contacted me sharing that they are looking forward to listening to your presentation. What we are looking forward is a broader based India-Ireland engagement. That should cover not only the high-tech areas but also the innovative aspects relating to culture and creative industries. I was Director General of ICCR in India, and there is a mindset in government circles in general, that the culture subject is treated as an expenditure item. They don't look culture as a holistic phenomenon which has tremendous economic benefit to the societies, besides the tremendous software and soft power and goodwill and friendship that is generated because of culture. His own first-hand experience is that using creative industries, we can create a lot of opportunities for our youth. And this is a very great opportunity for India and Ireland to work together, because both are so rich in cultural industries, they are so vibrant. Whether it's a craft, whether it is painting and music and performing arts and creative like daily use commodities, both in the modern urban setting and also the normal folk setting. We both have so much of richness. If we just connect the right people together, a lot of opportunities will be generated. With these words, I have a great honor of welcoming Professor Arthur Duff and we are very grateful that you accepted our kind invitation.
Now, okay. आदरणीय राजदूत मिश्रा, आयरलैंड और भारत में विशेष अतिथि और मित्र, भारत में काम करने और रहने के अपने 40 वर्षों के अनुभव को साझा करने के लिए आज दूतावास मैंने आपके साथ जहां आकर मुझे बहुत खुशी है. Ambassador Akhilesh Mishra, ena is Georgia Girke, in Ehren of Senegal. Van aansals der Adventure left in you, zijn ambassador kan me dat geeft lien, ik sta daar, bij de governor of ik mag toil in Nederland. Respected Ambassador Mishra, distinguished guests, and friends in Ireland and in India, I am very happy to be here with you today in the Embassy to share my 40 years experience of studying, working and living in India. आदरणीय राजदूत मिश्रा, आयरलैंड અને ભારતમાં પ્રતિનિધિ મહેમાનો અને મિત્રો, ભારતમાં કામ કરવાનો અને અભ્યાસ કરવાનો મારો 40 વર્ષનો અનુભવ શેર કરવા દૂતાવાસમાં આજે તમારી સાથે રહીને મને ખૂબ આનંદ થાય છે. May I thank His Excellency Ambassador Mishra for this kind invitation. The title of today's talk is Connecting India and Ireland Through Creative Industries. I have been fortunate enough to have been connecting and creating in both Ireland and India for the last 40 years, and I will be sharing some of this experience. I believe that to connect is to add value to the parts, which leads to a creative output, whatever the discipline or the industry. By way of an introduction, I would like to establish some understanding of each other, of our differences and our similarities, and of our shared histories as a backdrop to introducing the contribution of the Irish in India, and more particularly to highlight the dynamic role of the Indians in Ireland currently. Rather a tall order in this short space of time. Let me begin with the big picture. We could not be more different in terms of scales of population and land mass, the climate, culture and religion. It is not an equal playing field for starters. We are a country and they are a subcontinent. The entire population of the island of Ireland would fit snugly into Ahmedabad, with space for many more if push came to shove. Or we would be a small cluster at the next Prayag Kumbh Mela at the confluence of the Yamuna, Ganga and Saraswati rivers, along with the 50 million other pilgrims coming for their Shahi Snan, their holy day. Not quite locked down. If we were to travel on the train from Dilrugar in Assam in the northeast to Kanyakumari in Tamil Nadu, at the southernmost tip of India, it would take 3.5 days, and we would be stopping at nearly 60 stations on the way. I spent a lot of time for work in Jaisalmer in the west of Rajasthan, and a couple of years ago when I was there during the monsoon, it was raining heavily. Dadaji, who was Manish Bhai's grandfather, remarked that it was one of the 7 good rains he had seen in his lifetime. He is now 85. In contrast, there are places in the foothills of the Himalayas and other hilly areas where more than 400 inches of rain will fall during the year. And as for the heat, it's enough to say that the scale of the landmass embraces extremes of all kinds. What might be a hot summer's day here could have people there reaching for their woolly jumpers and mufflers. Tempered by the movement of people, peacefully or through multiple invasions and conquests over thousands of years, it is these extremes that have generated wonderfully unique and expressive cultural and religious traditions that are the diverse manifestations of the India we live today. While we struggle with Irish and English, and maybe a bit of a continental language, there are 22 official Indian languages, along with countless regional dialects and other languages. This is indicative of the huge diversity of cultures that all coexist with quiet pragmatism. There is a great capacity for people to to adjust and to accommodate each other. However, this has its limits, and there can be all hell to pay, which we also know about here in our small island. For someone who is not familiar with the range of differences, it is hard to imagine just how cosmopolitan cities are, where multiple diverse communities from all over the country live and work together, each with their own language and food, social and religious customs. It is something we are quickly coming to terms with here, as the social landscape of Ireland is changing utterly. We have much to learn from the Indian models. Having outlined differences, let me also dwell on what binds us. There are possible links from prehistory, and there are very definite connections that have bound us together in the modern era. Regarding those ancient connections, I refer to the research by the late Professor Miles Dillon, Celtic and Sanskrit scholar, who proposed that the Aryans and the Celts came from a shared source in Central Asia, and as they moved west and east, retained common elements. He developed this thesis on his understanding of shared social structures and linguistic forms. This was written in the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies in Simla, where he was a visiting fellow for 2 years in the late 1960s. Speaking of connections, this was formerly the Viceregal Lodge, built in the 1880s by the then Viceroy Lord Dufferin, who came from County Down. Dillon's research was published posthumously as Celts and Aryans, Survivals of Indo-European Speech and Society. The more recent connections arise from both of us being subjects of the same master. With the establishment of the East India Company in 1600, a trading company that gradually took control of most of the subcontinent, followed by the direct British rule from 1858 until 1947, India has had an equally intense experience of being a colony as we have had. As this is the domain of historians, much better qualified than I, will quickly move back to the Irish connections that developed in tandem with the colonial system. Beyond the telling of tales, I hope that this narrative will reveal more about the nature of the country as well as something with a great potential for mutual development between us. As has already been said by Mr. Sahu, in terms of my background, I landed up in 1981 at Sept University to join the Faculty of Architecture as an undergraduate. How that happened is another story which began the year before when I took part in the first annual field trip to document the historic abandoned city of Vijayanagara in Karnataka as a student draftsman. This was organised by Dr. Michel and local partners. This vivid introduction to India, measuring and drawing these spectacular architectural remains, led me to choose to return as a student itself. Now we have contextualised Ahmedabad for you. Ahmedabad has always been an important centre of textile manufacturing and trading. In the late 19th century, Mr. James, who was the collector at the time, saw the huge potential of the Sheikh Look, the business people of Ahmedabad, and introduced them to the new technology for textile production being developed in England at the time. They took to it instantly, and very quickly this ancient walled city was ringed with more than 70 mills, generating huge wealth for them and for the city. In the mid-1930s, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel approached a group of influential mill owners with the idea of establishing an educational trust to provide for the education of the young people of Ahmedabad. The principal visionary was Kasturba Lalbhai, who, when asked how much land would be required for the project, replied that he wanted to buy as far as the eye could see. He ended up securing 700 acres, which now forms the heart of the educational campuses of the city. I mention all this because it is indicative of a spirit that is essentially Ahmedabadi, rooted in place and tradition, but also willing to take huge risks and embrace the new. The trust enabled the School of Architecture to be set up in the early 1960s by recent Pritzker Prize winner Balkrishna Doshi as a place where solutions for the building of the new India could be imagined and taught. He had worked with Corbusier on his projects in Chandigarh and in Ahmedabad. The trust continues to be a major benefactor to our campus. A few years ago, our new library was built in honour of Meerawati Ben Lalbhai, a pioneer of women's empowerment and education. I'm sure you're also familiar with the significance of the city in the life of Mahatma Gandhi. It was to hear that he returned from South Africa in 1917 and established his ashram on the banks of the Sabarmati River, devoting the rest of his life to the betterment of the people of India. In his autobiography, The Story of My Experiments with Truth, he recounts the story of his life and how he developed his concept of active nonviolent resistance, which underpinned the Indian struggle for independence and other nonviolent movements in the 20th century. Clearly hugely charismatic and influential then, his presence was still vivid in the 1980s. Ahmedabad in the 1980s was very different from Dublin at the time. However, any issues arising were quickly contextualised by the demands of the course of the uni and facilitated for me by a very generous group of batchmates whose families received me without condition and with many of whom I remain connected. The hostel I was put up in was called H Block, the Irish significance of which is not understood. Early on, I met someone who, on hearing I was Irish, told me that my people were to be found in Ellis Bridge. In due course, I made my way to the area named after the first pucka bridge built across the river in 1892, connecting the old walled city to the undeveloped western area. A local engineer, Himmat Budget, built it using steel trusses sent over from Birmingham. Ellis was the commissioner of the northern zone at the time. On knocking at the door of a wonderful old bungalow, I was greeted by Miss Shannon, a small woman from Belfast with a halo of white hair, pink cheeks, and wearing a frock. She was one of the Irish Presbyterian missionaries, known locally as the IPs, who first arrived in Gujarat in the mid-19th century and built a legacy of schools, hospitals, and other institutions that continue to offer service to this day. I had to come to India to meet my first Presbyterian, and we became fast friends. She was the last resident of the Zanana, or ladies' bungalow, in the mission compound. And when she was not giving me cups of tea and chocolate, she was up to her eyes with the children of the leper colony on the banks of the river. But that is a miraculous story for another day. It also marked the beginning of my understanding of how the Irish, across all walks of life, have made great contributions to the growth and development of India for many years. One of the benefits of the recent virus has been the opportunity to sit still and to put together the notes and references I've been gathering on the engagement of the Irish in India over the last 250 years in the form of the gazetteers, this was kindly mentioned. The influence of the Indo-Irish that existed at every level is extraordinary. You will know many. Sister Nivedita, the Cousins, the Raja of Tipperary, Yeats, Tagore. But let me pick out a few examples you might not be so familiar with. The persistent nature of historic Irish connections is perhaps epitomised by the presence of Éireann Cuara, Irish town, in Siroy district, which is part of the old Jodhpur state. I came across this small town on a train journey to Rajasthan from Gujarat many years ago. This was the location of the 43rd Éireann Cuara Cavalry Regiment that was established in the mid-19th century by Captain Hall, an Irish officer in the British Indian Army. The regiment was disbanded in 1921, and the name of the town was changed following independence to Javailand, after the dam built by the then Maharaja of Jodhpur to provide water to the region. The name still lives on, however, as the granite formation existing in that region is now known as Éireann Cuara Trap. I wonder if Oldham, an Irishman from Galway, who ran the Geological Survey, had anything to do with it at the time. In any case, Ireland is now embedded geologically, and it is the location of one of the national weather stations that still bear the name. There is a Celtic high cross in Brantage, north of Gujarat, commemorating the death of 300 children in a devastating famine that took place in that region in 1900. It was erected by the IPs. Earlier, I referred to the number of languages that exist in India. The man responsible for establishing the Linguistic Survey of India in 1898 was George Grierson from Dennegeary in County Dublin, a graduate of Trinity College who joined the Indian Civil Service in 1873. In the course of 30 years, he was responsible for documenting information in 179 languages, 544 dialects, which he placed in 5 language families, all of which were published in 19 volumes. Through Miss Shannon, I met Howard Crummy, a retired IP who came back to visit in his 80s, and we toured the stations he had served all his active life in. Clearly a lion of a man whilst in service, and through whom development projects of all kinds to generate skills and employment were initiated around the state of Gujarat. As a result of Commissar's network, I was given my first architectural commission. The designing of the first secondary school in Chakya, a remote tribal area of East Gujarat. It meant staying in the village and working with the local elders and the headmaster, Mahendra Kakaria, to establish a brief for the building. It was a huge learning experience for all of us, as the limit of my knowledge was honed in order to meet their great expectations. After seemingly endless toing and froing of discussions by night and drawings by day, we arrived late one night at a consensus. I was very surprised to find the entire village out at dawn the following day digging the foundations. Against all the odds, I'm happy to say that the project got built. Although the School of Architecture was small, it managed to attract students from all over India, many of whom were as foreign to each other as I was to them. Included in the gang was Vivek Dalwar, a Pathan whose people hailed from the northwest. He was given great respect by the other students, and I learned that earlier members of his family had been freedom fighters in the struggle for independence. At the same time, I was finding out about relatives of mine who had served in India in different capacities, including a cousin of my father's from Roscommon, who was the then governor of Punjab. It turned out that Vivek's great-granduncle was Bhagat Ram Talwar's older brother, Hari Krishna Talwar, a martyr to the cause, having been sentenced and hung in 1931 by the British for his assassination attempt on the governor of the Punjab. Now, as it happens, it was not our cousin Bertie Clancy, but an earlier Irish incumbent, Sir Geoffrey Montmorency in Kilkenny. But what a transformation in 50 years. After 9 years of studying and working, I returned to Ireland and established a design practice along with Great Tisdale. This gave me the opportunity to maintain the Indian connections I had developed in the past. And some 7 years ago, I had the privilege of being invited to return as a faculty member to my alma mater and establish a new master's program in furniture design, along with managing the resources of the new library. That contract is over, and I now divide my time between here and Studio Praxis, a design studio with a local young architect, Manish Kumar, and we have a design studio and furniture workshop there. So we talk of the Indo-Irish with reference to those who went in large numbers to India. However, I would like to coin a phrase referring to the Indians who come to Ireland, the Hiberno Indians. Currently, there are about 50,000 people of Indian origin in Ireland, forming one of the largest groups of non-Irish ethnicity. Perhaps our next census form should have a Hiberno Indian box to tick. As our nationalist movement developed, it was closely observed by similarly motivated Indians, many of whom visited in the late 19th and early 20th century. Indula Yagnik, Gujarati freedom fighter, wrote a history of the Irish freedom movement in Gujarati following his visit here. The historian, Dr. Kate O'Malley, has done pioneering research in the field of our shared history during the 20th century. This is the year of happy anniversaries for both of us. Our first state visitor after independence was the great cricketer Ranjit Singh, the Jam Sahib of the former state of Maldives, who came to visit Connemara and subsequently bought Ballyhinch Castle. He brought his nieces over to study in Canmore Abbey, one of whom is the grandmother of the head of the Green Party in Gujarat and is now our client. The Irish Constitution was studied in detail by Dr. Ambedkar when he was drafting the Indian Constitution, and he incorporated several clauses from the Irish Constitution. Over the years, I've been privileged to meet remarkable Hiberno Indians who made wonderful lives for themselves and their families, as well as contributing to the development of this country. The Panibandas, the Chaulas, the Bhagwans, the Shuris, the Kulkarnis, the Thakors, the Navis, the Inamdars, the Choksis, to name a few, some of who are now no more, but have left new generations behind them, as well as skills, businesses, and experiences. This, what was once a thin network of families scattered around the country, is now a veritable blanket, reaching every corner. So far, I have dwelt on the historic Irish connections with India, and whilst I have been busy over there, Ireland has been transformed by the growth and development of the Indian community here. In the same way that we landed up over there in the past, primarily as a way of earning a living from the opportunities arising from the needs of administering the empire, so also Indians arriving here have found good jobs and living through satisfying the demands of our growing economy. In terms of the purpose of my talk, this is a much more important part of the story. India is no longer far away. It is now all around us. The effort of connecting Ireland and India is now so easy. There are many stories to be told about the integration of these people into Irish life, and I hope that this task is taken up by the community, and perhaps the Embassy could initiate an oral history project to celebrate the 75 years of Indian independence. Not so long ago, if you saw someone in Dublin who was not Irish, it was a novelty. The reality of the Indians in Ireland today is a very different picture. There is not one walk of life where they're not embedded. The recent pandemic revealed just how connected we are when so many of the medical and frontline workers were Indian. Among the many, Lalu Bhagwan and his dedicated team in Ballantyre gave remarkable service at his pharmacy there. In my native place in County Wicklow, there are always a few families from South India at Mass. They are working in the local hospital. We also have had a series of Indian priests serving in the community. In numerous other areas, their influence and contribution is significant, in particular across all the IT and financial sectors, not to mention delicious food. In my experience, what characterises the relationship between Indians and Ireland is one of seamless adjustment and great ingenuity. I do not need to remind you that our Cornish's roots are half Indian. I believe this new reality is one of great importance for the future Chapter of Ireland. Whereas we came and went to India, went and came, the HIs are here to stay. And may I draw your attention to two members of our, one member of the audience here who has made a great difference to Irish lives. The possibility of adopting Indian babies for Irish couples has been a godsend. But as you can imagine, the processes involved are nothing short of a nightmare. For years, Shaheen has worked tirelessly as a go-between, helping couples negotiate a very complicated system on both sides. This has been an act of great kindness to so many. At another level altogether, Praveen Bhai, who looks after the cyber security of one of the big four accounting firms in Dublin, is happily based in the Midlands, where his children go to school and his wife is getting back into the workforce. When he's not doing something so top secret that if I knew, I would have to be shot. He is sharing his South Indian flute playing skills with the local branch of Kilda's Kilda Aaron, who in turn are teaching him to take whistle. Having established an understanding of how connected we are, may I come back to the title of this talk, namely Connecting Ireland Through Creative Industries. First of all, why India? Some years ago, former Indian Ambassador to Ireland, P.S. Raghavan, noted the importance of seeing the connections rather than the differences that exist as the basis of enterprise of all kinds, common language and similar systems of administration due to our shared colonial heritage, and questioned why on earth were we all rushing to do business with another large country further to the east, whose name I can't remember. It's very big over there. As you see, I took Ambassador Raghavan's advice to heart and have sought out the connections for myself and encourage you to do the same. It is now so much easier with online access as well as by connecting with local Indian resources. I'll give you two examples from personal experience. More than 15 years ago, I met a young accountancy student who was articled to a firm in Dublin while taking his professional qualifications. Dilip was from Baroda in Gujarat, which bonded us immediately, but he also belonged to the Sindhi community, his people having migrated from Sindh in present-day Pakistan generations ago. That everyone in India belongs to some community or other, I did not pay much attention to what it meant to be a Sindhi. After some time, he qualified as an accountant, and we gave him the space in our office for him to set up his practice, which he did with remarkable enthusiasm and industriousness. Very quickly, he was fully connected to a range of clients, as well as the relevant people in revenue. In 2008, some of you old enough, some of you are very young, will remember the spot of bother in the market. We called it the hesitation. It was not good news for us, and precipitated the dismantling of business we had built up over more than 20 years, involving client services, manufacturing, and retail. We asked Dilip to step in and deal with this crisis. Very quickly, he took over, and with such dexterity, managed the complex process of folding up the company, dealing with our staff, the banks, creditors, landlords, and us demented principals. By then, I understood what was the virtue of being a Sindhi. They eat, sleep, and breathe figures and negotiations. At one stage, I overheard him on the phone in deep conversation with Mary, his now fast friend in revenue, with whom he was on first-name terms, and was sharing our woes with respect to the tax implications of this ghastly process. Would I have even got to first base? When he was not at work, he was helping out in the local credit union in West Dublin, where he had settled with his young family, as well as playing cricket. Basically, he saved our lives. More recently, when I was flying to India via London, I found myself sitting beside a young Indian on his way home to Mumbai. It was soon revealed that he was Gujarati and was working in Dublin in customs clearance. As it happens, my main concern in returning to our business in Ambassador was to arrange for the shipping and processing of a container of goods that had been ordered. How lucky was I to find myself sitting beside Dublin right here, the source of all the information I needed for managing this complicated process. Work is in progress. Indeed, the traffic in both directions is increasing. Artists, writers, and architects are all on the move. Dorothy Cross has recently been a visiting fellow with the Alice Boner Foundation in Varanasi. Enes Harsha had an exhibition here some years ago. This month, artist Michelle Boyd is having a solo exhibition in the Jahangir Art Gallery in Mumbai. Irish artists have contributed to the Kochi Biennale, and Indian artists have been residents in various institutions here. Our embassy has supported numerous contributors to the Jaipur Literary Festival and the Ahmedabad Literary Festivals. McCullough Mulvin, the award-winning architectural firm, is currently responsible for the redevelopment of the Thapar University campus in Patiala, a project that is receiving international recognition. Joseph Walsh, the furniture maker from Kinsale, has major projects in India, and Ireland has been a popular location for several Bollywood films, thanks to Screen Ireland and the embassies. On this side, Siraj Zaidi, the founder of the Indian Film Festival of Ireland, has been India's film ambassador for more than 30 years. Alistair Rumble of the Irish National Sailing School is working with Club Marine Oaxaca on the development of eco-tours and motor-based activities. Art historians and historians at Trinity College, UCD, and Dublin City University have developed very productive relationships with Royal University and other institutions. Jane Olmeyer, Naman Nahuja, Kathleen James Tchaikovsky, and Linda Mulvin, up here, to name a few, are all busy sharing their research and developing these links. There are very important treasures of Indian origin that are in the safekeeping of the Chester Media Library and the National Museum. These are held in trust for India and the world. And I'm wondering, what treasures did we leave behind in India? In terms of design, Ireland and India have had a connection going back to the 1970s. Through the friendship of Ashok Chatterjee, the former director of the National Institute of Design in Edinburgh, and Paul Hogan, who was CTT, now Enterprise Ireland's first design manager. He was also one of the founders of the Kilkenny Design Workshops and the Institute of Designers in Ireland. In 1977, the IDI hosted the World ICSID Design Conference in Dublin, at which the award for Industrial Design for Development was given to NID. As a result of this recognition, the UN took note, leading to NID hosting the first UN Design Conference in 1979. It was a validation of what NID was trying to do, not only to establish a new profession of design in India, but also as a first demonstration of design education. This in turn led to further support from the UNDP for the development of NID. Another part of this connection with Ireland is Kilkenny. Handcraft was recognised as the foundation for India's contemporary design movement that owed so much to the pioneering efforts of Tagore and Vishwa Bharati and Gandhi's own Swadeshi movement. Kilkenny was an example of craft transition into industrial production. NID and the University of Limerick are now connected, sharing students and faculty. Can I also note that in both countries there are embassies and many state agencies and professional bodies whose remit it is to support, promote and develop connections of all kinds. They will provide you with all the facts and figures concerning rules and regulations, of which there are many. And however, it makes sense to work in tandem, building one's own contacts, as well as using the resources and expertise available. At the heart of everything I've been talking about regarding the building of connections is mutuality, of creating benefit in both directions. And I'm very happy that we have David Leach with us today, who demonstrates the importance of such a value. I got to know him maybe 30 years ago, and at that time he was already embedded in India as one of the principals of Kindle banking systems, who had developed a modular banking system known as Bankmaster in the 1980s. They were the first world-class Irish high-tech company receiving global recognition at the time. In India, the State Bank of India deployed the branch platform, Branch Power, across 2,000 branches, which allowed them to operate in an offline mode. The work of Kindle has been superseded by many generations of new software and technology, now mostly emerging from India. David was the general sponsor for the Dwarka cricket team's All-Ireland tour, which we organised over 20 years ago. He has since retired, however, he is now busy again with India at my behest, advising Iran from Ahmedabad, the latest generation of financial services companies developing cutting-edge softwares and applications for financial services management. And so his involvement comes a full circle. So the journey continues as a way of learning and developing. While it is certainly creative, it is fundamentally innovative. And what is that? Making something out of nothing. Here is celebrating our creative and innovative futures in India and Ireland. It has been a pleasure sharing some of my experience with you today, and I would like to thank Ambassador Mishra for the opportunity, and also to thank Mr. Sahu, Head of Chancellery, and Anna, the Social Secretary of the Embassy, who both organised this event. As you can see, I'm giving nothing away. The job is yours. So particularly the young people, get out there and just do it. It's there to be done. So whether you're Irish or you're Indian, the doors are open on all sides. They're swinging, there's no locks. It's just a matter of pushing. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Better you speak. Ask in Gujarati.
Can I just
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. It was a lovely talk it was a pleasure to listen to you because you spoke as a story. It was amazing to hear, and especially the Gujarati, the fluency with which you spoke Gujarati. So my name is Bindu Nair. I've been living here 18 years now, and I'm the country lead for a pharmaceutical company here. And Thank you so much for the Embassy as well for organizing this, because this topic is very, very important from our perspective. 2 girls here, growing up here, 14 and 7-year-olds, and I think for them, connecting the India and Ireland, and it's so important for us, and it is through creative arts, it is through sports, that's how they are connecting with the Indian, with the Irish culture as well. They are they're getting into the Irish culture through schools, no problem. But what is important for us as well, for them to be connected in the roots in India as well. So that's from a community perspective. We do a lot of things in the community to ensure that we are bringing our culture to the next generations. And it is people like yourselves has a key role in that, Arthur, I have to say. And thanks to the Embassy, like this, bringing Professor Arthur over, and getting an opportunity for us to speak to you has been amazing. So thank you. I've just a question for you. I know you said that I'm not going to give anything away, which is fair enough. It's up to us to do it, and of course. But I do have a question. You've seen so many that you probably have. Ireland is one part. Ireland, India was one part. You probably have seen other things done in other countries where two cultures have come together. Do you have a good example that you can share with us?
Okay, so when I'm saying I'm not giving anything away, I'm giving everything.
No.
It's there for the taking. And that's so, with respect to His Excellency's fundamental, what it is to connect. So connecting opens the door, and then the possibility of something else happening. So, and is that defined by, what does that define? What I suppose also is so evident is how sympathetic our countries are to each other, and whether that's because of Professor Dillon's ancient observations about these connections, or temperament, or whatever it is, but there is a sense of the familiar. I've been there a long time, but it is foreign to a degree, but there is also a way of connecting, and it will never not be foreign, because as somebody was observing that outside their window there was somebody going by like an elephant and so on. We don't have too many of those in Ireland, so of course it's foreign, but it's about people. So yes, the culture is all foreign, but how people connect with each other, and how the willingness is there to connect. I think that's what I also admire there. In Ahmedabad, there's hardly any tourists, as Anne was saying, that when they visited 2 years ago, there were 8 million people. There's not one, nobody comes. But all eyes are not at you as a tourist, but they're just curious. And so what's that except the desire to find out more? And so then you start, and then, okay, whether you can speak the language or not, is that ever a problem? No. But it's the willingness to connect. So I think that's the word. The big word is connect. And then, as demonstrated by Mr. Leach, mutuality, that it goes both ways. So you push out, you get something, but in return something comes back. And so in that way, then everybody's happy. And then, God knows, if you could make some money, that would even be better. So there's a clinic, again, without getting too personal, but one of the ring roads, and there's a lot of wonderful hospital services now being set up there, people coming in for that sort of thing. And I go for treatment about once a month. And I'm getting transfusions of banya blood. So just for those who don't know, banyas are the business community. I'm hoping that...
Maybe like the other night track.
It's not work. So I'm just thinking, maybe next time. Maybe interested. But so then instead of getting the transfusions, I'm just pal up with the banya. Hence my connections with Dublin by here. So it all works. You're never alone, and it's a team. So you have grand ideas and everything, but how are you going to get anything done except by connecting with people? And whether it's because of language, because of skills, whatever. So I suppose if you have the energy or whatever, the passion to share something, well then that draws people, and then they put in some energy, they put in some skills, and then something gets done. And I had the great pleasure of being in that wonderful university, which is obviously all about team. And so the exposure to that many young people, all those systems, it's just great. So that's a long drawn out response to your question.
Any more questions? Any comments?
Questions, comments, any advice?
Yeah. Rehabilitation.
It's I was commenting on earlier on how I got involved in India, how I was so struck by the Indian way of life. The first time I visited the continent, I was very impressed. I came back, I said to my wife, we have to send our youngest child to Indian school. And she said, there are no Indian schools here in Dublin. And would you believe, there was one 10 minutes from our house, where Mrs. Trainer, who married an Irish man, she was a Sikh lady, and she ran a kindergarten. And we sent our youngest to that school. And he is remarkably different from our other 3 children, unfortunately. He's now 35. And I think it would be a great addition to Irish culture if that was replicated. Sadly, Mrs. Trainer has passed since. Well, one small story, and I won't bore the audience, is he was 4, about 4 years of age, and he came home one day and he said, I said, how's school? He said, fine, but Damien wouldn't sit with the group. Because Damien had actually got ADHD, and I knew that. And he said, I said, what did you do? She said, Mrs. Trainer said we must all go over to Damien and find out why he doesn't want to join us. And I thought, what a difference that is to the Irish way, where Damien would have been forced to join the group, made to sit, and excluded and othered as a bold boy or something like that. Anyway, I thought that this was a tremendous respect for the individual and a way of understanding. And he's very different. We all contributed to his formative years with Mrs. Trainer, and the respect for the individual and listening and understanding others that she gave him. And I think it would be a great contribution if that was replicated again. I think that would be a nice way to inculcate Indian culture into Ireland.
Again, it should go 2 ways.
I'd like to add something. I'm Vidya, and I'm an artist. I'm here since 2018. So when I came here first, I don't have an art background. I was an engineer. But I was my passion, and I've been professionally doing art in the past 10 years or so. So we came here because my husband changed jobs. And so I had to start everything from scratch when I came here. To find out the art markets and, network with more artists, find out where I can exhibit my art. And it was a bit of an exercise. So the first time I got to know about this People's Park event where, since People's Day, I think most of you have seen artists handwritten pictures over there, or painting. So when I went there and everybody was doing, it looked like, I was like, there's something wrong with what I'm wearing, but I was wearing something Western. I was like, what's happening? Then there was a friend of mine, Darren, he came and said, you know what, we haven't had anything exhibiting in many years. There was one long ago. And then subsequently, when the previous ambassador, Mr. Sandeep, was here, I had a talk with him and I said, sir, can you do something for the Indian artists here to exhibit or something? He said, what he said was very good. He said, Vidya, when you say artist, it's not just somebody who paints. Yeah, so many streams, right? So he said, you gave me something solid. Itne artist hai kya? As in, are there so many artists that I can provide something for you? And so he said, let me do my research. And that's how I started a collective for Indian artists here, and we call it the Dublin Desi Artists Collective. And we wanted to do our first exhibition, and pandemic took over. So we had an online event which the Embassy supported. We're very grateful for that. And last year during Culture Night, we had an event called Samhita Khela. I don't know if my Irish pronunciation is right, which translates to together in Sanskrit and Irish Gaelic language. So we had an exhibition with 20 Indian and 20 Irish artists. And even this year, we are having an event in Scientology on Culture Night, and we hope to do the same thing again this year. So, talking about creative industries and collaboration, I think we are really on this new path here.
Demonstrating.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
I'd just like to share my experience when I first met him in March. So basically, I was flying to Mumbai, and he was just 2 rows behind me in the same flight, and there were seats empty. So he came ahead and he joined me, and then we started, having healthy conversation. Fortunately, there was Wi-Fi in the plane,
He started having conversation with me in Gujarati. So immediately I messaged my father saying, Papa, there's someone sitting next to me, he speaks Gujarati. And it's going to be a great flight. 10 minutes later, as the conversation, moved ahead, he says, listen, I'm not Gujarati, I'm an Irish guy who stays in Ahmedabad and knows Gujarati well. So, just, recollecting of the Banya blood which he spoke about, that totally comes from this side, because throughout the flight, all we were talking about was figures. How to get his product in Ireland and sell it. So our entire conversation was him narrating me that this is how I'll be shipping, and me giving him figures that this much it will cost for this XYZ shipping.
That story goes on. So.
No, I also was with JNU just before the pandemic with UCD in the School of Arts and Aesthetics with Nana Aluja. We had a wonderful teaching exchange. He came also to UCD with Kathleen, Czechoslovakia. And also I grew up my daughter there, and she's originally from Delhi, and she was constantly being approached by people. She kept saying, looking at me saying, "Oh, I'm from South Dublin." I don't know how to answer these questions. So it was a very nice way of being there, and wonderfully hospitable at the university. And Harun Bhaji also was very, very much involved in a very nice conference on decolonising the museum. So we were looking at ways of thinking about these very, very current topics and very current issues at the moment. So, yeah, I'm longing for our connection. So we have an Erasmus Plus exchange, and we're hoping to reactivate that as soon as the post-pandemic phase is active. So, thank you very much. It was wonderful to hear you today. I am for and that. That's right.
Thank you. On behalf of Embassy, I convey my heartfelt thanks to Professor Arthur for his scintillating lecture, and to all the audience here, and also for participating for our social media, Facebook. Thank you all. We will have some refreshments.